and welcome to Money Matters Today. I'm your host, Doug Hepburn with Hepburn Financial Advisors, offering securities and advisory services through Cetera Advisors, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Cetera is separately owned from any other entity. I'd like to welcome my guest host today, Ken Jordan from Round Point Mortgage. Ken, how are you?
I'm wonderful, Doug. How are you? Good to see you again.
Doing great, thanks. Good to see you too. Tell me something good in your world today.
I'm having a good hair day. How's that?
Fantastic. It looks great. It looks great.
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff going on in our world. Inflation talks and rising interest rates. It seems like one tough conversation after another. But the good news is people are still getting homes and people are still buying, and we're still out here making things happen. So that's where we're at.
That's good.
Yeah.
If they can find homes, I'm sure that you're probably seeing more refinancing than you are new home purchases. Is that right?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, the refinancing has kind of trickled down a little bit, primarily because it's gone up. We are seeing some cash out refinances, which still one of the beautiful things about this market is that values are up. And with that, there's a lot of equity, and people really can utilize their home's equity to improve their financial situation and restructure, maybe some credit card debt and student loans and things of that nature. So I am having those conversations. From a buyer standpoint, we are pre-approving probably the same number of buyers that we pre-approve in a normal market, but fewer of those buyers are going under contract because there's so little inventory out there. And I want to steal the thunder of our guest we're going to be bringing on in a few minutes, but it's pretty low.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned inflation earlier, and you're absolutely right. I mean, everybody's seeing it from the grocery store to the pump. It's interesting to think about that and how that might have an impact on the real estate market, particularly since, we went through this period with the pandemic of everybody working from home. Now you got companies who are going back to the office, and people are probably thinking, well, geez, my cost to commute has just gone up. Can I just work from home more?
And it's impacting. I mean, there are a lot of folks that have moved further and further from metropolitan markets. The second home market turned into a primary residence market in a lot of ways. Because if you can work from home, you can work from anywhere. You might as well work from with a nice view. We are starting to see more and more folks go back to the office, and we're seeing some people that are resistant to the idea of going back to the office, and we're seeing some employment changes, some career changes, some people that we pre-approved in the last 12 months who are looking to avoid going back to the office, switching jobs. We're seeing that too, which is pretty interesting. The inflation piece, it's a big deal. Inflation, not only in home prices, but fuel costs and heating your home. And, it's pretty interesting.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's, food and energy have a tendency to be the most volatile when it comes to price increases and inflation. But the question is whether that's going to translate into increased costs for building materials and raw materials. I mean, we kind of saw a spike back in the beginning of the pandemic where, pressure treated lumber just went through the roof. Mm-hmm. And then once, because all the pressure treating factories got shut down and they couldn't treat any more wood. I'll never forget going to Lowe's because I was going to buy stuff. And the guy there said, hey, you better get it now because it's not going to be here in a month.
Yeah.
And then, of course, once the inventory came back on the manufacturers, the pressure treaters came back online, inventory came back on the market and prices went down. It's a real question now whether or not you're going to see that those supply chains resolved and more supply coming on the market driving prices down, which is something that, when we look at home prices, we've seen a big increase, not only because of the supply demand imbalance, meaning the supply of houses to buy and the demand for people who want to buy them, but the ability for the builders to get materials to build them. Apparently, I know there are shortages in, of all things, insulation. that's tough to find these days, and the suppliers are limiting how much their customers can buy.
Just about anything you get overseas, there's a shortage of. There's a shortage of
exactly
stone. There's a shortage of countertops. There's a shortage of cabinets, prefabricated materials, any electronics, appliances. The turn times and the lead times on those are substantial, and as a result, the delivery times become a huge question mark in these builders. And now they're trying to price out a home based on a long delivery time where the cost of materials could be drastically different from the day they sell that contract to the day the buyer takes ownership of the property. There's a lot of volatility there, and that's also playing a role too.
Yeah, I can appreciate that, and that creates more uncertainty for the builders because they've got to finance their build, their work in process over a short period of time, and now that's being extended. Well, it appears like the Federal Reserve is trying to combat the rise of inflation. I mean, they obviously raised rates a couple of weeks ago. It looks like they're projected to raise rates as much as 5 times this year. Mm-hmm. The question is whether or not they're going to be doing half-point increases, and whether or not that's going to stick, whether it's really going to have an impact on inflation.
It almost has to. The question is it will we see a curve in the inflation down? Where the first quarter of a point, second quarter of a point, where it'll temper the inflation, or will it take all 5 increases to start to see an impact? I don't know what we're going to see, but what I really think is interesting about the real estate market with respect to the Federal Reserve is that, typically the Federal Reserve comes out and they increase interest rates. And we know that the Federal Reserve's interest rates, the Fed funds rate, doesn't have a direct impact on mortgage rates, because mortgage rates are based on mortgage-backed securities, the supply and demand of those mortgage-backed securities. Right. But they typically move in the same direction. And a lot of investors watch to see what the Federal Reserve does to determine what they should do with the mortgage-backed securities. And what's interesting is the interest rates have gone up so dramatically over the last, let's say, 90 days, and there's only been one Fed hike. There's only been one quarter of a point Fed hike. So essentially all of the upward movement in the interest rates over the last 60 to 90 days has been rhetoric-based. It's been based
anticipated by the market
rather than the actual, movement of the Fed, which I find really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And that's also caused a lot of consternation because short-term rates are going up faster than long-term rates, and the yield curve's inverting. And some people are saying that's a sign for a recession. I beg to differ. The Fed can control the long end of the curve because they've got a lot of inventory. But this leads right into our question that we got from a viewer this month. Ronald Moore from Philadelphia asked, how much effect do you think the increase in interest rates will have on the real estate market?
I can't wait. I'm going to give you my answer, but we may. I know we have a great guest today, and we may have them touch on this as well. But my thoughts are the challenges we're facing right now are primarily supply side challenges. Like I said before, we're doing the same number of pre-approvals as we've always done. It's just a lack of inventory. In the previous bubble, let's say 2008, it was a demand side issue, meaning that there was just too many people with access to funds that were out there buying homes. Some of them buying 2 and 3 homes they didn't even need because they could, and property values were going up. And it was easy to fix that problem. You turn the faucet off. You get rid of the programs, all of a sudden the demand dries up. And in that case, it really ended up being a crisis because the demand dried up so much that, a lot of people couldn't get out of the homes they were in. There was a big foreclosure wave. Now, right now, it's a supply side issue, which means that there's just not enough houses out there. So increasing the interest rates, it may cool off the demand a little bit, but there's still not enough houses to meet normal demand. And I think that until we're able to increase that supply through construction, primarily through the exit of, older homeowners into, rental or retirement communities, I don't see that changing anytime in the near future. Now, we talked about institutional investors a little bit, where there's some, some people think that there's more institutional investing going on, and other people think it's not that big of a deal. But certainly any institutional investors that look to capture their gains and start to put inventory on the market there could change that. But I don't know that interest rates are going to have as big of an impact as people are hoping on.
Great answer, Ken. If you'd like to have your question answered, here's how you do it.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says Send Us Your Questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, MONEY, -matters, MATTERS, TV.com.
Fantastic. Well, I'd love to welcome our guest today. Maryann Staszak is a realtor with Remax Main Line in Paoli. She's also a real estate investor as well as a real estate lessor, and among a whole number of other accolades as an entrepreneur. Maryann, welcome aboard. How are you today?
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm doing well.
Fantastic. We just wrapped up 2021, and it was the best in 15 years. What has been the driving force behind this? A lot of people are asking this question.
Right. So I mean, everyone has an idea, right? The low interest rates, the pent up energy from COVID has brought many out to look for a change in and boosted the demand. People want to move from their current house where they've been under the same roof with their wives and their husbands and their children, schooling, working. So as soon as we were able to get out in a safe environment from COVID, people wanted more. They wanted more space. They wanted more rural areas. They wanted vacation homes. So we saw a lot of secondary homes at the mountains and at the beaches, wanting to just get out under that roof and move forward.
That makes a lot of sense.
Maryann, question for you. So again, we talked a little bit about a lot of this stuff in the first segment, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Now, who do you see buying and selling right now? What are the characteristics of your buyers and sellers?
So, almost that Seinfeld, who are these people, right? Who are they? Who are these people that are going out there and paying or bidding $100,000 over asking price? Who
Crazy.
are, no inspections, no appraisal contingencies. Who are these people? So I had to do some research myself, right? I can only come into a certain percentage of the folks. But when I did do some research, the millennials, 26 to 41, make up the largest share of the home buyers at 43% last year. They are working from home. They're enjoying that. They're getting married. They're making a lot of money. They're basically just taking care of themselves right now, right? So they have the money, they've saved, and so the millennials are the highest percentage of buyers out there. What we've also seen, and I've seen personally, are investment buyers. The rental, as the supply goes down and the demand goes up, the rents increase. So as the rents increase, then those investors are getting a larger ROI. And so we were looking at a lot of investors. And then we saw a lot of big city people from New York and LA, and even outside the country, China, India, other European countries coming here, looking at, I know I'm in the Pennsylvania region, seeing that this market is fairly a low tapped area and reasonably priced. So those were the largest.
That makes a lot of sense. And when you see disparities in pricing on a particularly something that like real estate, which is really local, it makes you wonder, okay, well, where's the value? Where have we seen the biggest increases? I mean, I know when we look back at 2021, the big theme was everything's going up, but I'm sure some areas of the market have gone up more than others. Is that right?
Yeah, school districts seem to pull people to certain areas. So if you're watching what's the best school districts in Pennsylvania, outside of the major cities, as far as you can get away from the major cities, especially with the pandemic, to get a less priced home in a good school district, we're seeing an influx in those school districts in Pennsylvania, at least, pull higher people and volume of sales.
Greater demand, because people want to make sure they get their kids into a great school, and so that it throws off the supply demand imbalance. That makes sense.
What about the supply, Maryann? I know that for a long time the supply, I guess the time on market was about a 2-week supply. Is that still the case?
That's my understanding. That's the latest I saw, and I did some research the last few days through PAR, Pennsylvania Association of Realtors, and we're still in that 2-week. We're still in that 2-week, 15-day.
15 days. So that means the average home has been on the market for 15 days and it's sold.
Or 3.
Or 3.
Or 3. Right.
To
or 3 with 15 offers and a couple lottery tickets and your firstborn, right?
I'm just saying, we've seen 3 or 1 or coming soon and it's gone. So those that are able to sell, should put their houses on the market because, as we know, the demand is super high.
Well, what's the average? What's the average days on market and what you would consider to be a normalized market?
So I'm only looking in my sphere, but we've seen if it's priced right, it looks right, it's clean and ready to move in. Under 7 days, really, under 7 days.
Right, but back before the supply demand imbalance, we were seeing houses on the market. The average inventory was anywhere from 30 to 60 days. Right, anything that's been on for 60 days is usually due for a price reduction.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't that standard in the industry?
If it's on the market for 30 days, it's due for a price reduction.
Yeah.
Or 3 to 4 weeks. Because houses are flying off the market because the demand is so high and the supply is so low. If someone wants to sell their house, the millennials, like we mentioned, they want to move in. They want to move in ready. They want the gray walls, the white cabinets. So if you want to sell your house and it's a little dated, I suggest that you just throw some paint on and get it looking pretty and clean it up real well. And if it's in the right school district, if it's in the right peripheral of those school districts, you're not going to see it on the market for more than 7 days.
Yeah, no, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, but I guess in this market, if you've got millennials being the largest segment of buyers, you would imagine that the largest segment of sellers would be those baby boomers who are retiring, who are already retired, and they're looking to get into either a retirement community, 55 plus, long-term care, something like that. People transitioning into their older years. Have you seen a lot of that activity?
So there's this, is it safe to go out, right? Last year when things were changing with the pandemic, is there another variant coming? Should I stay in my house? And then there's, but where do I go? Phenomenon. So then I kind of feel like it's, they're stuck in mud scenario.
Right.
What do I do? And I feel that with the holidays, December and the cold winter months in February, I feel like there was like a powwow between families and younger generations. Can mom and dad move in with us and have a multi-generational home? Do we need that extra space? Do we have that extra space? Should we start looking at 55 and under older when we're 56? Should we, there's been a lot of different changes, or should we now live in our vacation condo in Florida full time and sell our home?
Right.
So, I think that generation, the boomers, definitely want to sell their home. I think it was all happening so rapidly in 21. And then I think there was a little cool down between December and February. And now I think people are putting their houses on the market because they have better plan of what's the next steps.
So for 2022, then what are your analysts? What are you reading? What are their predictions for the market and as we move deeper into the 2022?
I think it's still a crystal ball. I think there's so many variables at play, as we talked about earlier, the inflation creeping up.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know when the next person's going to put some supply out there? I mean, I think everyone's got the news that if you want to sell and make some money right now, it's the time.
But you got to know where second base is. That's the big dilemma that everybody has.
Yeah, exactly. I think my kids are still in school. I can't go anywhere.
Yeah. Well, from a macro perspective, when you think about it, we've got excess demand, limited supply, interest rates are going up, and as interest rates go up, it just makes housing less affordable. It's already at almost at a tipping point when it comes to pricing because you've got such a small inventory.
Right.
I guess the real question in most people's minds, certainly the buyers, not just the people who are buying it as a place to live in, millennials, right. Is at what point does the increase in interest rates make it unaffordable and drive prices down, or at least pause prices, and cause people to think, is this really a good use of my money? Am I better off staying in an apartment or renting a house? So I think that's really the $64,000 question.
Yeah, and I don't know. We all wish we had a crystal ball, right? I think interest rates. I mean, if you look back to when my parents bought, they were 14%. When I bought the first home, that was 7%. So hey, we were at 2 and 3 for a long time. That's fabulous. And studies show that inflation has beat out, home sales have beat out inflation time and time again. Right. So, that is the $1 million question, right? That's the crystal ball. I'm not those analysts, but if you look, 2020, let's see, I have some numbers here from NAR. 21 home prices. Nope, I'm not looking at the right one. Here we go. In 2000s, the inflation was 2.6 and the homes were 2.3. In 2010, the home prices were 1.8. I'm sorry, the inflation was 1.8. Home prices were 4.9. And I have this little Bureau of Labor Statistics. 20 and 21, inflation was 3% and the home prices were 12. So year over year, home prices have still beat out. It got real sketchy in the 80s. But at long term, we have low interest rates considering, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I know my brother and father were in the real estate industry as appraisers. And the expectation back then, 10, 20 years ago, was that real estate was going to appreciate around 7% as a rule of thumb.
Right.
Granted, that's not guaranteed. That's over the long term. But if you can assume that your property value is going to double every 10 years, that's not a bad deal. I think for most people who are buying a house to live in, they really ought to think about it as a living expense and minimizing that as opposed to an investment. Because as soon as you start banking on the appreciation in your personal residence, if it doesn't go up, you're kind of stuck. I mean, and you won't know that until you get to the end.
No.
That's a great point. Yeah. You're buying the roof over your head. The second home you buy, you could call that an investment. But the first home you buy, you're buying the roof over your head. And you're either going to do it one of two ways. You're going to buy that roof over your head on a monthly basis, paying to a landlord. You're going to buy that roof over your head, utilizing financing and leverage and your down payment and getting a mortgage and purchasing that way. I mean, obviously, if you're lucky enough to buy it cash, great, then interest rates don't matter. But that's really, at the end of the day, that's what the first-time buyer needs to understand. And it's also the second-time buyer, Maryann, right? They have to understand, okay, great. So you're going to sell high, but you're also going to buy high. It's pretty much a net wash for you. For the first-time buyer, hey, look, you got to have a roof over your head. You can rent. Rents have gone up 19% year over year, right, Maryann? Like, so it's not like rents are cheap right now either.
Yes. Yeah. And the other thing is when you have a mortgage, when you decide to buy this home, you know what you're paying month after month. Taxes may go up, but rent.
You fixed your cost of capital. Exactly.
Someone else's hands.
When was the last time a renter was able to refinance and lower their rent? That's not a thing, right? But as a home buyer, if you were to go in, even though the rates might be up a little bit right now, if they do come back down, you always have that opportunity to refinance and bring your payment down.
Exactly. I agree.
So real quick, I mean, we've got this distorted market. We've got millennials trying to buy houses. There's not a whole lot of supply. Do you have any secrets or suggestions for people who want to buy a home and are just getting beat at every one that comes up that they really like?
So, a couple things. There are people are paying or offering bidding over listing price, right? So I have one suggestion, because I've seen this happen a couple times. Make sure that your agent or you do the comps, because if the appraisal is not there, and you know this, Ken, if you're overbidding to the point where the appraisal is not there, then you're out of the game anyway. And the homeowners the sellers are getting smarter too. They're saying that's way over the top, and that's not gonna fly come the mortgage appraisal. So I think that there's a fine line. Yeah, does the person listing the house, the seller, want the largest amount of money? Sure, but when it gets to over the top, do they pick somebody a couple notches down? I think I'm seeing that a lot lately. It's not always the highest price that wins. And first-time home buyers, I think inspection is key. I think you hang in there as long as you can. If you miss out on the first two, the third one's a charm, but at least you know what you're getting, and you're not paying out of pocket after the fact.
Good point. Good point. Even if you don't win the bidding war, you may have learned something and come out with fewer scars than getting the home of your dreams at a price that's unaffordable, right?
And I know from having rental properties and doing some rehabs myself, you walk in and you could tell if a house is solid. You can't say everything behind the walls, but you could see some water leaks. You could smell. You can do a little bit of a test walking in and see what you're in for. And I stay away from those no inspections, first time buyer. Be forewarned, this one might have some issues.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, this has been really good, Maryann. We appreciate your input and insights into the residential real estate market. It's been great having you on.
Thank you for having me.
We have another show coming up shortly. And our guest, next week's guest, is Adam Davis of the Unifund. He is the founder of the Unifund and is going to be a great guest. Once again, thank you for tuning in to Money Matters TV, where your money matters.